esoteric understandings and sensitivities, then the conduit between God and the human is the study of the Torah and the practice of the Torah. Torah is called the will of God. Torah is called the wisdom of God. Chochmoso Yisborach, his wisdom. Ritzono Yisborach, his want, his desire that people do this and people do that. And this is really the way we sensitize ourselves. Faith has an intrinsic contradiction in Hebrew. Emunah means to believe something. To believe something means you believe, like blind belief. There are people, they don't need more. If this is what Hashem wants, that's good enough for me. And then the same word, emunah, has the word uman. And I'm not talking where Rav Nachman is buried. Uman means a worker, a craftsman, somebody who has to work at something. That if you want to have proper emunah, if you want to have real emunah, you have to work. What do you have to work at? You say, I want to believe, I want to believe, I want to believe. No, that's not what you have. You have to work in making yourself sensitive to esoteric, to more than video games, television, movies, newspapers. Or if you're really an intellectual, you'll read the newspaper. You won't just take it off CNN News and sorry, I get carried away sometimes. So this is to sensitize a person. And I'll tell you a story that I told at least 100 times. Because I see a few new faces, I'm going to say it again. There was a fellow, I'm not going to mention his name, because then I'll mention his name, as soon as you hear his name, oh, you heard that story already. So, he really had no connection to religion, and he was a searcher. He was searching for meaning in life, and his life was brilliant. He was a medical student, and he ended up going to school in Tufts University, and he became a very, very exceptional specialist, and he has a very big position today. But till he was 23 years old, he didn't do the only mitzvah he did is that he did not commit suicide. That was the only mitzvah that he practiced. And somehow in his search, he searched Eastern religions, he went into different forms of Christianity, and somehow he heard there was a rabbi who was a holy man, and his name was the Bostoner Rebbe, of blessed memory. Rabbi Levi Horowitz, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Horowitz, and he had a Jewish center, very vibrant, with a synagogue in Beekman Street, in that area in Boston. And he went to him because he heard that he's a spiritual leader. He's a giant. And he went to him with the amazing questions that were haunting him. He says, he can answer these questions, if he can make sparks fly, if he can show me the lightning and thunder. And he went into him, he got an audience with him, and he put a few of his questions to the rabbi, and then the rabbi said, I'm willing to dialogue and discuss and answer your questions. But first, I would like you to do something for me. He says, yes. I'd like you to, for 6 months, take upon yourself to put on tefillin, to eat kosher, and to keep Shabbos. And because he was very genuine and sincere, this person, and looking for something, he says, okay. And he walked out of his meeting. He said, am I an idiot? I don't want ritual. I didn't come here for ritual. I came here for lightning and thunder, for the Aseres HaDibros to be delivered on a platter. And he said then, but he gave him his word. Anyways, 3 months passed, 6 months passed, 9 months passed, he didn't come back to the rabbi. And the rabbi bumped into him in his shul. And he said to him, Yosef, his name isn't Yosef, the names have been changed to protect Yosef. Saying came to him, and he said, Where are you? I'm waiting. And he said to him, the questions that I had 9 months ago are not questions to me today. That there is a power in the study of Torah, in the practice of the Torah's mitzvahs, that sensitizes your mind and your heart in an amazing manner. And therefore, when the Talmud tells us, Barosa Yetzer Hara, I created an evil inclination, Barosa Torah Tavlan, I created a spice to neutralize that called Torah. It meant that when you study, when you practice, gradual increments, you don't go from 0 to 120 kilometers or miles per hour in one swoop, even if you're driving a Ferrari. But it will sensitize you. It is the conduit between infinite and the finite. There is nothing more finite than a human being. He or she is more finite than any animal, than any reptile, than any fish, than any bird. Because the human being is the only one who has the capacity to choose to be lower and more vicious than the worst animal, more beastly than a beast. Animals can't do the atrocities human beings can do to each other. And God is not infinite. He's more than infinite. He's infinite and finite together. And therefore, when you read in the Torah, this week's parsha, which speaks about the building of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the sanctuary, and you'll read about the Aron Kodesh, you'll read about the Ark of the Covenant, even if you didn't see Steven Spielberg's movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark. No, I'm coming from California, but I'm not getting paid for every movie that I mentioned. Don't worry. I'm not a trailer. So, there was a place called the Holy of Holies that had a certain measurement, and in this Holy of Holies that had a certain measurement, they put an ark. And the ark contained in it the luchos, the tablets that the 10 Commandments were written, the broken pieces of the first tablets, and the first Sefer Torah that Moses initiated to be written. And other opinions say there was a jar of manna, and other opinions say there was the staff of Aaron's staff, that the miracles. But once you put that ark there, it had to take up some of, and then you worked around it, the circumference, you would think there would be less cubic space. And there was something a miracle that took place, that the same amount of space, raw space that existed before the ark was placed there, was still there after the ark was placed. Something that a finite mind can't understand. And it's called the Ha'oroin Eino Min Hamido. That the ark was placed, it was physical, but it was the essence of symbol of God, not infinite, but infinite and finite together, something the human being can't comprehend. Getting back to our topic. So therefore we've gradually developed a bit of a definition, and the bit of the definition is as follows. Number one, Emunah is the stuff that is so contradictory. The stuff that Abraham had to deal with, Avraham Avinu. When God says to him, nope, you're going to have a great mighty nation. You have no children now. You have one child from your concubine Hagar, and no children from Sarah, and you're going to have a child now. And Abraham said, I'm thrilled, but I'm happy with my one child from Hagar. He says, no. That's not going to be the progeny, your children, that will be like the stars and like the sand. That's not going to be. It's going to come from Isaac. And then when Isaac is a young boy of 37 years old, God tells him, Kachna es bincha es yechidcha asher ahavta, take your son, the one son. God didn't want him to twist. I have two sons. Take the one son, Asher ahavta, that you love, I love both of my sons. And then he said, Es Yitzchak. Take him, v'haleu sham le'olah, and bring him up for a sacrifice. Now what should go through a normal mind? What's Avram? Forget it. No, I was going to say forget it. The pain of losing a child, right? Is like, no one, we won't even talk about that. But his whole belief, what did Abraham preach his whole life? Monotheism. There's one God. What did all the other countries and nations and beliefs and religions do at that time? They sacrificed their children to the gods. And now God tells Abraham, where a person could respond, Abraham could say, listen God, what are you doing? Hold on. You're going to ruin everything, God. You're making me do something that is against everything that I preach and everything I believe and everything that exists. I should sacrifice my son? Abraham didn't say boo. He said, if this is the will of God, that's Emunah. That's Emunah. And so how do we, and each and every one of us has, not Abraham, but people had more than Abraham. People had to watch their children. So that is when the challenge of Emunah, and at the same time to know God, to know that there is a creator, to know that it is not logical to say that the world is just by accident. As we would not accept that premise according to the Rambam, we wouldn't accept this by anything. Anything with order, anything with sequence, anything with wisdom, anything that emanates beauty, anything that has regularity, that rises and sets, and even the slightest, the smallest piece of vegetation. So this is what the Emunah and the knowledge of God according to the Rambam is. Work and study and think. Whether you study philosophical texts, whether you study Kabbalistic texts, whether you use a rational approach, whether you use a above rational approach, work and study to develop the knowledge of God. V'yodaito hayoim. You shall know Ki Hashem hu Elokim. Which I'm not going to explain what that even means. But the das, at the same time, the joy and the beauty and the purity of Emunah. And what helps us along? The Torah. The Torah gives us the energy. The Torah gives us the capacity. The Torah gives us the power and the ability. The Torah gives us the opportunity to be able to do this. But you know what? God sure picked funny creatures that he wants to believe this. You know, he should have made angels. He should have made people that have a greater threshold for spirituality. And I want to point something out to you. The Talmud says it in Gemara Brachos, on Daf Samach, page 60, folio page 60. And we say it every day in the prayer, every day in the Siddur. Whether you're a man or a woman, if you open up the Siddur and you say the first three blessings in the Siddur, from the first blessings, no matter what Nusach you're saying, but Elokai, my God, Neshama, the soul, Shenosata bi, that you gave in me, Tahoirahi, is pure. Every human being. Ata varasa, you created it. Ata yitzarta, you formed it. Ata nefachta, you blew it into me. You gave it into me. Now look at the words. The first few words. Elokai, God. Neshama, the soul. Which neshama is he talking about? The godly soul. Every human being has a godly soul. Shenosata, that you gave. Be! What does be mean? To me! What does that imply? There's me, and I have a spiritual component of me, which is the godly soul, and me, who is not the godly soul, nasata bi. When you read it, just read it. You know, say, hey, God, you gave me a soul. But think of the words. It's implicit. It's clearly, the implication is because it is. And there is the verse, actually it's from the book of Job, but it's not in the book of Job. It's in, again, the Talmud in Bava Basra, where it discusses this poor fellow, Job. I mean, you know the story of Job? Job is the symbol of suffering. And I'm not going to talk about Job because that would be a lecture that would keep us here till daybreak. But the Job, in his frustration from all of his suffering, he said, Barosa tzadikim and barosa rishoyim. You created righteous and you created evil. And the Talmud asks the question, wait a minute, did we not learn in the Gemara and Nida, in a different tractate of Talmud, that certain things are destined? Oni or Osher, if you'll be rich or if you'll be poor, if you'll be very successful, if you won't be successful. You know, you can be a happy human being even not being successful. You can be an unhappy human being if you're very successful. Gibor or Cholosh, if you'll be destined, if you'll be strong, if you'll be weak. In 3.5 minutes, I turn into a pumpkin. I have my time. But tzaddik v'rosha lo yikama. It doesn't say righteous or evil. It says, on the contrary, that's up to your own free choice. That's what you live for, to make those choices. So what does it mean? And I'm going to give you an amazing explanation now. Not because it's mine, because it's not mine. I'm just the conveyor. I'm just like the tape recorder. Or blabbermouth, if you want to say. And what is the explanation? That it's based on this pasuk. Isaac told his son Esau, "V'osu li matamim kasher ohavti." You should make for me mazem matamim, delicacies. Kasher ohavti, like I love. So the literal explanation is: bring me some sweet and sour meatballs, and bring me some sweet plum sauce chicken, and bring me some. Well, what do you call the fish stuff that I can't stand? That people sushi. The sushi becomes sweet and sour. I'm outnumbered. In my family, everybody loves sushi, except me. Must be something wrong with me. And there are two delicacies. So the literal translation is talking about delicacies, and the inner explanation of this is explained in chapter 27 of Lecutre Amorim, which it says, Matamim, the delicacies, God has a delight in two types of servants, two types of people. One person is like a tzaddik. He's a tzaddik because he does these three sins that I just told you about at the beginning of the talk a few minutes ago. Hollywood. A minute and a half left. Matamim, delicacies. There are certain people, their life is, they're born with a high threshold for good. They're born with a high threshold for spirituality. They're born with a high threshold for study. They're born for a high threshold of goodness and kindness. They're born with a very low threshold of jealousy. They're born with a low threshold of envy. They're born like that. And God says, you have a service. You have a mission. Your mission is what? And then there's what Job was saying, Barasa Rishoyim. Not that the people will sin and be evil, but you're always struggling. There's always a struggle to do good. Doesn't come natural. My self-centered focus is very strong. My desire to do the wrong thing is very high. And that type of person can feel, I'm worthless. Forget about this religion bit. It's not for me. I always want to do the wrong thing. I'm doing this thing for 20 years, 30 years, and I still want to do what's wrong. I still like to do what's not appropriate. And so you should say, no. God made sweet, and He made sour. And sour is a delicacy. And the avodah, the service of working with yourself, of bending yourself, of controlling yourself, of being able to assert a new habit for yourself by enough consistent work, and this could be a lifetime. It doesn't mean that sometimes you graduate to the level of sweet.